Well, I think this media that we're seeing, the media coverage that we're seeing, is just reinforcing the idea that racial hierarchy and white supremacy is still dominating many of the conflicts that the world sees today. And I think that we have every right as audiences to be disgusted when we see this language, but we need to push back, we need to speak out, and we need to hold these journalists accountable, because obviously their institutions, their professional practice, their ethics are not. They are reproducing harmful narratives. They are using Orientalist and racist language, and we absolutely have to make them know that this is not acceptable in 2022. These actually have direct effects, and one of those effects is that the agenda behind this war, behind each and every conflict that has this kind of coverage, is not questioned by the journalists, when that's absolutely the role of good journalism, is to hold power to account and to think of those who have the least amount of power, especially when it comes to conflict. And right now, we don't have any context for the conflict that's happening in Ukraine. The war started when the Russian military made a move. We don't have any knowledge based on Western media of the soft war before, or the history of conflict, or the history of Ukraine in relationship to the USSR. We only heard of Ukraine last week. So unfortunately, if you follow only Western media, you're doing yourself a disservice. And of course, if you're not holding journalists accountable, then you're doing all audiences of Western media a disservice. I think that we also have to be mindful of the social media spaces and recognize that these platforms are not free platforms, that they're full of censorship. I think we also have to push back against these forms of censorship because, of course, we're being told by governments that these decisions are being taken on behalf of these Western audiences to quote unquote protect them, but it is not protection. It is censorship that is eliminating a valuable perspective that audiences themselves need access to, and should not at all allow governments to be making these kinds of crucial decisions about which kind of information you have access to and where it comes from. So for sure, we need to also be mindful of the social media space, and we need to push back against those companies who decide to censor content on behalf of the allies of their governments. These are policies by social media companies to degrade the information online and to further the censorship tactics. So they already have internal tactics with their algorithms that push content down. And concerning, for example, messages on Palestine coming from a particular perspective. They already have not just algorithms, they have the labels that you're talking about. And so when an audience sees such labels, then they react differently and often engage less with media that might be labeled Russian-owned or Russian-influenced or Iranian-owned or Iranian-influenced media. And so, of course, the producers of such content are impacted, and audiences are underserved by social media companies who are censoring content for them, rather than those audiences taking on that content and being able to look and have access to media freely, as social media claims to be providing.